OK, well, look, let's speak to Stephen Dorrell about this. Stephen is former Conservative Health Secretary, I think under the John Major government. I'm sure he'll have something to say about a range of issues that I want to raise with him, particularly these NHS warnings. Stephen, thanks for your company on Talk. Good to see you. Back in your day, so you were Health Minister, I think, from 95 to 97. Were you in the habit of issuing warnings about the weather so that people were told not to slip over? A bit like, you know, when it's hot and you're told that you must drink water. I mean, what sort of nanny state have we ventured into, Stephen?
Well, I do think it's a bit beyond the brief of the National Health Service to give people advice as to how to deal with hot weather or cold weather. Of course, it's true that if there's icy weather, people that you're in danger of slipping over, and most of us who've been around a few years and probably in at greatest risk of slipping over have worked out some years ago, indeed decades ago, that ice causes you to slip underfoot.
You would think that those that are vulnerable would realise such a thing. And the NHS, of course, did have some months ago an answer to this, a video that they put out suggesting how those that are perhaps elderly and more vulnerable should tackle slippery pavements. Now, those watching on YouTube now will see this. Now, this is not a parody. This is actually a video released by, I think it was Scotland NHS, to Glasgow specifically, I'm told, to inform us all how we should walk like penguins, I kid you not, like penguins, in order to avoid falling over. So this is where our resources, our time and our efforts as an NHS, this is where they're being expended. This is 4 or 5 members of the NHS outside on a slippery surface, literally walking like penguins to show us all how not to slip over. I kid you not. Stephen, this is absolute lunacy, isn't it?
Well, look, I agree with you that it's not a high priority. I think it's also, but I think we need to avoid getting too steamed up about it, if I may say so. One thing the health service is charged with, and here I think that the health service would have a good point to make, is that prevention is better than cure. I think occasionally people step over the mark and they get it wrong. But engaging in spending money to avoid people unnecessarily hurting themselves, becoming ill, needing to see a doctor, needing to go into hospital, that is a legitimate part of what the health service, and indeed an important part.
No, but Stephen, venturing into the realms of telling us how to walk, and also telling us by way of some kind of lockdown-esque mandate that we should not go out because it's going to snow, that's way over and above their brief. That's beyond the pale. Yeah, that's nanny statism. People
get these things wrong. I'm not disputing that. What I think would be an overreaction the other way is to say that the health service shouldn't concern itself with the causes of ill health and accidents, because that's exactly what it's one of the classic obligations of the health service to be involved in prevention. That's not invented by woke modernism. That goes back to Aneurin Bevan in 1948 and the Attlee government.
Well, maybe, Stephen, this value for money that is being expended by the NHS in terms of this advice and these diktats is justified by the £1.1 billion extra that we're now paying NHS managers, specifically over the last 10 years or so. So the bill for such managers that are on salaries of between £70,000 and £90,000, those managers obviously have increased in number significantly in that 10 years. The bill is nearly £3 billion. I mean, it's gone up by a third in 10 years. How can that be justified?
Well, a lot of salaries have gone up by over that 10-year period. I'm not going to sit and justify individual salary levels.
But at the same time, they've failed in their outcomes. They're tasked with specific targets and goals, which they have failed at year after year after year. So why are we increasing their salaries and just throwing money at them by way of those salaries for outcomes that are unsatisfactory?
What I absolutely am going to defend is the proposition that the health service needs to invest in good managers. Now, it doesn't mean every manager that's employed in the health service is a good manager. There are some excellent managers and there are some less good managers in the health service. But the idea that you spend roughly £200 billion of public money without investing in the management required to ensure that you deliver good value for that money, I think it would be a grotesque misrepresentation of the
Stephen,
priorities
what's
of health service.
grotesque, with respect, what's grotesque is that those managers have increased in number. Their salaries are significant, between £70,000 and £90,000. The point is that we are not getting value for money out of them because the outcomes, whether it be cancer treatment and the consequence of that cancer treatment being satisfactory in terms of survival rates, whether it be NHS waiting lists, which of course we know are at record levels, we are paying more to get less and to get worse outcomes. That's the issue. It's not the fact that we need managers. Of course we do. And we need managers that are efficient and that actually succeed in their quest to do better. It seems that those managers are doing worse and being paid more for it. That's my issue.
Well, we're careful. What's actually happening is that they're doing more, but not enough more to keep up with the demand. And that's, of course,
so they're failing. So they're failing.
Sorry?
They're failing. Why don't we put them on performance-related pay?
Many of them are on performance-related pay.
Well, maybe a higher proportion would be necessary because we're still not seeing satisfactory outcomes.
Because what people... the health service exists in a goldfish bowl, and there's always people who have opinions about how this or that aspect of it can be done better. And that's a legitimate issue. I don't complain about that. I think that's part of what being a public service is about, that they are accountable to the people who work in the health service, whether they're managers, whether they're clinicians, are accountable to the people who pay the bills and who rely on the services they provide.
But how are they accountable if they're earning more for worst outcomes? Where's the accountability? There is no...
The answer, and the other thing we always need to remember is that within the health service, we're not talking about a lump and mass that are all performing the same. There are some parts of the health service that perform exceptionally well. There are the majority of the health service that perform more or less in line with average, and there are some underperformers. And what the health service, where I think you do have a strong point, is that the health service isn't always good enough at identifying the underperformers and ensuring that action is taken quickly to improve the performance of those aspects of the service that are not delivering to
Stephen, I think it's easy to say that some aspects of the NHS are okay, but the problem is when it comes to those aspects of it that really matter to individual members of the public, those that sit in A&E for 10 hours, those that can't get an ambulance to their house despite having a heart attack for several hours, and that sit in ambulances outside A&E doors at an increasing rate, particularly at winter, because there's not enough organisational ability to get the people out of beds so that the people in the ambulances can get into those beds. When it comes to waiting lists, when it comes to, for instance, 1 million cancer cases missed during COVID lockdown. I mean, I think, with respect, you're making excuses for an NHS that I'm sure is very, very close to your heart. And I would suggest that because we keep making excuses for it and it sits there on a national pedestal, that is exactly why it is never probed, critiqued enough to improve.
I'm not seeking to make excuses for anybody. And I've been extremely critical of aspects of the delivery of service across different parts of the health service. What I am encouraging you to do is not to imagine that it's the same everywhere and everybody suffers from the same problems, to identify more accurately where the problems are and take action to deal with those that are problems.
Well, we could look at Wales, for instance, which, of course, under a Labour government of several years, is even worse than it is in England, particularly when it comes to waiting lists. Let's just quickly, before you go, let's talk about social care. So you would have seen this news this morning that the Labour government, in their wisdom, have decided to kick the very important issue of social care, the social care crisis, down the road. Why is it going to take them 3 years to come up with a remedy? I mean, this is not at all what we expected by way of... do you remember that manifesto that the Labour government waved in front of electorates' faces? I mean, that's rather been kind of ripped up and destroyed, I think, in many respects since they took office. But this isn't what we expected from Labour at all, is it?
I have quite a long memory on all of this. I have a memory of Boris Johnson saying he had an oven-ready deal on social care. That was in 2019. We never saw any evidence of that. It's 28 years this year since I left office as Health Secretary, and I plead guilty to not having resolved the problem of social care in a term of office that expired 28 years ago. When I saw the news this morning that we were going to spend another between 3 and 4 years thinking about a problem, the solution to the problem of social care, I was reminded that the NHS itself was founded, was set up almost exactly 3 years to the day after the day when the Attlee government took office. It took them 3 years to set up the NHS. It's apparently going to take best part of 4 years to think of a plan to what to do with social care. I don't think that really addresses the urgency of the situation properly.
And Stephen, what is the solution? I know it's you're probably not going to be able to give us that in 1 or 2 minutes on this station, but give us an overview of what you think needs to happen in terms of solution, rather than just creating commissions that will kick the can down the road.
Well, and you rightly say, I can't give you a 30-second solution. The key to social and healthcare is to recognise, number one, they're the same problem. They relate very closely to each other. If you don't have proper social care, you end up with people in the NHS that should never be there in the first place. And actually, it makes this conversation circular, because it brings us back to the need to prevent people going into the health service, into hospitals and GP surgeries, when they don't need to be there and wouldn't need to be there if there was proper social care provided. So instead of thinking of GP services, hospital services and social care as separate silos, we have to think of them as a single joined up service. And I hope that's what will come out of this, in my view, massively unnecessarily prolonged process.
And what is their reasoning behind the 3-year delay?
That it comes up just before the next election and nobody can hold them to account for doing anything.
Wow. OK, well, I think that's going to become a rather familiar theme, I suspect, with immigration, crime, the economy. You think Labour in 28, 29 are going to be begging us for more time because one parliamentary period is not long enough to solve all of the problems that the Conservatives left us previously? Do you think that's basically going to be the message?
I don't remember a government at the end of its first term that didn't make that case for a second term, actually, whether it is a Tory government or a Labour government. I think that's a comment on the human nature.
Yes, well, the difference will be whether we actually believe this lot or not. I suspect not. Stephen Dorrell, former Conservative Health Secretary, thank you very much indeed.